Around a bit. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Planning Committee. I'm Liz Schell, the Chair of Planning. Jim Neal is to my left, Vice Chair. Councillor McLaren is standing up. Councillor Osanic and Councillor Turner are all here. We have a number of staff. We have City Lawyer Ray and Director Agnew and our Commissioner Hurdle and members of planning staff, Manager Vendetti, Planner Sands and Planner Diedrichsen, and we have our clerk, City Clerk, Mr. Bolanonier, and our clerk, Mr. Thompson. So we have a great turnout of city staff and a great turnout of citizens for the two public meetings that we're having tonight. So I'll first read the notice of collection that I read for every public meeting. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the back of the room is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning, Building, and Licensing Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be opened to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. There is also a sign-in sheet for interested members of the public at the back of the room. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. Exemption to this rule is outlined in bylaw number 2006-75 to delegate various planning approvals to staff and to adopt certain procedures for the processing of planning applications subject to delegated authority. Council has authorized staff to use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting, comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to Planning, Building, and Licensing Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared, making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council, and City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and anyone with an interest in the matter may file an appeal. Interested persons are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Thank you. And our first public meeting is concerning an application for a zoning bylaw amendment, 5 Cooper Street. And we will hear from the proponent first.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning Committee, members of the public, and staff. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with Foten Consultants, here to present a zoning bylaw amendment application at 5 Cooper Street on behalf of John Walker. So the property is located in the Sunnyside neighborhood in the older area of Kingston. It's within a 5-minute walk of Queen's University, a number of transit routes on University Avenue, Johnson Street, and Union Street, as well as Winston Churchill Public School, a number of places of worship. It's generally a very well-serviced area from a community perspective. It is an oversized lot, larger than average in the area, and has undergone a little bit of evolution over the years, let's say. The original dwelling is the 3-story brick on the right-hand side of the image when you're facing it. That's also the east portion of the property. Around the early to mid-50s, a 1-story addition was added onto the rear of that house, as well as onto the west side, so kind of in the middle of the house there. And then in the early 90s, that addition was expanded. It was increased to 3 stories, and then an addition was added onto the side of that, giving the building that we have today. Parking is available in the rear, access from the driveway on the west side. There's a room for about 5 or 6 spaces. The building itself is a 2-unit dwelling with a total of 17 bedrooms. There's 7 bedrooms in the brick portion and 10 bedrooms in the additions. The intent of the application tonight is to change that. It's to reconfigure the building to allow a total of 5 dwelling units, ranging in number of bedrooms from 2 to 4 each. So there won't be any change in the total number of bedrooms. It'll stay at 17. The application would also lead to some changes in some improvements in the facade, in the landscaping, in the parking area. As you can see sort of in the bottom left of the slide, there's just a rendering of what that would look like conceptually. And also in the future, the intent of the zoning bylaw amendment tonight is to help facilitate the future severance of the property. It's proposed to converting it from a 2-unit dwelling to a 5-unit dwelling would make it into a multifamily dwelling. But down the road, as you can see from the building itself, it functions much more like a townhouse and a set of row houses. So in the future, the zoning would allow the future severance of this property into 3 lots. And that's what you see on the right-hand side there. Those dotted lines are where those lots would be, which is consistent with where the party walls are. There is no change proposed to the building footprint. I do really want to stress that. The only changes to that effect, or that are similar to that, would be to the front. I'll use my mouse here. In the additions there's currently 1 entrance, and that porch would be expanded to allow for 3 separate entrances, and each unit would have its own entrance in that portion of the building. And then in the rear of the house, there would be some improvements to the fire escapes, providing additional access to each of the units. That way, making it more convenient for parking, but also to meet fire standards and so on. And the zoning amendment, of course, would also recognize those performance standards of the existing house, recognize the increase in density, and I'll get into the details of those a little bit in a few minutes. To give you a bit better of a sense of how the building will work, these floor plans show each unit. So what you're seeing here is Section A. This is the brick building that's on the east side of the property. It'll be a shared entrance from the outside, coming in from off of the porch, and then an entrance into the ground floor unit. It'll be a 3-bedroom unit, and an entrance here going up to the second and third floors, which will be a 4-bedroom unit. The middle portion, that's Section B, will have its own entrance here. It'll be a 4-bedroom unit, 4 bedrooms spread across the 3 floors. And then the westernmost portion, again, this will be a 2-unit section, each with their own separate entrance this time. The 1 ground floor unit will only be a 2-bedroom unit, and then the upper floors will have, again, 4 bedrooms. So there's applications that are required to make this transition happen are the zoning bylaw amendment that we're presenting this evening. Site plan control will be required because it'll be a multifamily dwelling. It'll have 4 more dwelling units. And that'll be a mechanism for the city to ensure that those landscape changes and those facade changes occur. And then in the future, should the property be divided, it'll have to go through consents to create the lots, as well as creating rights of way to access the rear parking areas. From a policy perspective, the property is designated residential, which allows both the current and the proposed uses. The residential policies do generally encourage density increases and intensification in areas that are well serviced in the city. And they provide some tests where there's an increase in density, and this proposal meets those tests and is in conformity with the official plan. From a zoning perspective, it's currently zoned for a 1 and 2 family dwelling. That's the standard A zone in the downtown of the city. We're proposing a site-specific B1 zone, recognizing that this will be a multifamily dwelling. The zone would allow a number of these performance standards and also be structured so as to facilitate those future severances. It would be structured so that as a 1 building on this 1 lot, it would be a multifamily dwelling, and then should those be severed, it'll recognize it more as a row house, which is what the building will function as. So to give you a breakdown of what those zoning reliefs are, The front yard, the side yard, the amenity area, and the driveway, those are all existing situations which we're proposing to recognize through this zoning bylaw amendment. And then the maximum density, increasing from 2 units to 5 units on paper, and a dwellings per unit or per net hectare is a significant increase from what it is now to 64 units. It falls within the medium density standards, which are those tests that we ran through the official plan. But there will be no change to the number of bedrooms. It'll still be 17 bedrooms in the house, and that's what's there now. So summarizing that, this is an increase in density that will not lead to an increase in intensification. Really, it'll be the same number of bedrooms, same number of people living there. The building footprint will not change, nor will the scale or the massing of the house, or of the building that's there. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statement as well as the official plan. And the site-specific zoning that we're proposing would allow the proposed use as well as facilitate those future severances down the road. So that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Could I hear from staff, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, notice was provided of the public meeting in accordance with the Planning Act. Notices were sent to 124 properties within 120 meters of the property, and public notice signage was posted. We received one written submission in support of the application that's in the addendum to the committee's package. I also received a couple of phone calls seeking clarification on the proposal.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Just a quick comment and then a question. I do believe in my first time through doing this job in the 90s that we had a very packed house when this came, because this was one of those early monster additions that was really worrisome, primarily because 8 to 10 bedrooms clearly was an issue. I appreciate that what's being proposed here is 5 units instead of 2, I'm not sure it's sufficient parking with potentially 17 adults, but it meets, I believe, the requirement of the zone, which is 1 per unit. And the idea of improving the facade is, I think, a very, very good idea, and it's going to look good. And finally, I want to say our official plan and what we're trying to do with student housing is make sure that in future we're not building just for the student market. And when you have 10-bedroom units, it's very doubtful that anybody else but students will ever live there. And students have every right to live there, but in this configuration, if somebody wanted to convert it to a family home, it would feasibly be able to happen. So I applaud this proposal. I'm curious about, and I know that site plan isn't something that we talk about at zoning, but without a bump up, we don't always have an opportunity to get in our 2 cents worth. So with the indulgence of the chair, I'm just going to say that I'm looking forward to adequate landscaping and tree planting and that kind of thing being included in the development, because all of these streets used to be boulevard streets, and we lost a lot of the trees in ice storms and other things. So to replace them would be very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? If there are no more from the committee, I will open it to the floor, and we will have a microphone on this side, and there is a microphone on that side. If you'd like to come to a microphone and give your name and address, and the clerk will be recording your comments, and please keep the comments and questions to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schell. Joan Bowie, 414 Albert Street. I'm going to repeat a bit of what Jim said because our histories go back equally as far. Although I believe that spot zoning is generally bad planning, I am in favor of this situation because all the evidence we have is that students and others do not want to live in monster homes, and nobody wants them in their neighborhood. I'm reading from the Student Housing Review from 1990. In June 1990, a controversial proposal for 1 Cooper Street brought the issue of large additions to existing dwellings before City Council. In this case, the owner was proposing 2- and 3-story additions in order to create a 6-bedroom unit and an 8-bedroom unit, and somehow they now have added 3 more bedrooms. So as a result of, and I'll skip through this, but as a result of these specific concerns raised regarding 1 Cooper Street development's proposal and general problems attributed to student housing, the planning department was requested to review alternative planning initiatives, which may be undertaken to prevent similar situations from occurring again in the future. And I'm reading this tonight because I would really wish that the planning department would continue with their efforts to stop this. There's now a 13-bedroom house which has been constructed on Center Street. And so we continue to overbuild or allow these huge buildings. It's high time we had another interim control bylaw and looked at the situation once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come to the microphone? And it's already on, so if you'd like to just...
At my name? It's Ruth Pest into the... Okay.
Ruth, I'm going to have you speak into the microphone, please.
Sure.
And then the clerk can record you.
My name is Ruth Pester, and I just want to give you a little history about Cooper Street. I have lived on Cooper Street. It will be 47 years this coming June. I live directly across from that monstrosity that you've seen up on the screens. And the history to this is that at one time when John Walker first decided to build it, he was taken to court by the city, and the judge was Judge Campbell. And Judge Campbell said to him, and I remember very clearly, he said, "So, Mr. Walker, you want to build a hotel on Cooper Street?" And I love the students. I work with the students, but to change a lovely street, which was families and houses with students, into something which we have today and which I hear is creeping further and further into our area, is disgraceful. It truly is. And there was something else I was going to tell you about that building. Anyway, that's probably the important point that I wanted to make, that no one should have to live on a street which is really very small. I mean, it's 6 buildings, 4 on my side, and now it was 7, and now it's 4 on the other side. And to have such a different streetscape. And Kingston is a beautiful city. Oh, I remember what I was going to tell you. We have relatives, Charlie's gone now, but when he was alive, we had a wonderful Castleman reunion. More than 2,000 came, and we had students from Germany and France. And we would walk down the streets through the area, and they were shocked at the condition of the homes. And they were student buildings. They said that would never be allowed around the universities that they attended. And it's just a disgrace what Kingston has allowed to happen in very beautiful areas of our city, particularly Sydenham Ward. I grew up in this city. I went to KCVI. We bought the house on Cooper Street because we wanted our children to go to Churchill School and KCVI. And it was a beautiful street. And as these landlords moved in, the families moved out. And now, no family could buy a house in the area. It's atrocious, the prices. The house next door to me sold for almost $700,000. And of course, it's full of students, not as many as across the street. But I'm sure you get the picture of what I'm saying and what I think about the whole situation.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the application on Cooper Street? Seeing none, I will ask, I'm not sure if there were questions there, but if you'd like to respond, please.
Certainly, and appreciate the comments. I think the intent of this application is to really allow this building and this development to appeal to a broader range of tenants and a broader range of users, and I think that it will have that effect. I think that's really all I can say in response.
Thank you, and I'll offer the committee one more round. Councillor Neal?
Probably a question more to staff, if I could. In the event that an interim control bylaw is passed, since this is adding no additional bedrooms, it's not altering the footprint, so it's solely an internal renovation. Would I be right in assuming that they would indeed be able to get a building permit given the plans before us?
Director?
Thank you, and through you. So again, it would highly depend on the way that the interim bylaw is written, the detail that's in it. That would be approved by council. But depending on the situation, it could be caught by the interim control bylaw and would have to wait until after the land use study is done and the bylaw is no longer in effect.
Given the intent, I would hope that we'll be able to word the bylaw in such a way that indeed sensible redevelopment without additional bedrooms would be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the committee? With that, I will say thank you very much for your presentation, and I'll close this first public meeting.
Thank you very much.
And now I will open our second public meeting. This is an application for zoning bylaw amendment 671 Brock Street.
Thank you, and hello again. My name is Jennifer Guerra. I'm a land use planner with Foten Consultants, and I'll be presenting a revised proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 671 Brock Street on behalf of the City of Kingston and Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation. This is the second public meeting for this project. Back in November, we had the first public meeting where we presented a proposed 4-story apartment building, affordable housing project on a portion of 671 Brock Street. We received a substantial amount of feedback from the public, both at that public meeting and additional correspondence. The applicants have been engaging members of the community this whole time and having discussions about concerns and changes being made to the plan. We've received feedback from staff as well, and I'm here tonight to present a revised design. We've revised the site layout as well as the building design to hopefully address the concerns that have been raised by neighbors in this in the community. Just for some brief context and history, this is the site. It's the former St. Joseph, St. Mary Catholic School site. It's intended that it be redeveloped with a park, which will be located in the north and take up about 55% of the site. The remainder would be divided into a potential future market housing block in the southwest and an affordable housing development in the southeast, which is what we're primarily talking about tonight. This was the original concept that was presented back in November. And if you recall, it included access via Napier Street, so there would be a driveway that would go over the potential development site and travel east towards the proposed parking area at the rear. There were 13 parking spaces, including one barrier-free space, and the development was 4 stories in height and 32 units. This is a rendering of the original proposal, the 4-story proposal, and we received quite a bit of feedback, and I think one of the main elements that we took note of was concerns related to height, and that in this location, based on the context and the surrounding uses, that 4 stories is too tall, and that something like 3 or 3.5 stories would probably be more appropriate in this location, given the abutting uses and the built form in the surrounding neighborhood. We also received concerns about providing access off of Napier Street, and there was a strong desire to see access change to be on Brock Street. We also heard concerns related to parking and that there's potentially not enough, and in particular that there is a desire to certainly meet the minimum requirement for barrier-free parking on this site. And then finally, I'd say the last main concern was related to density. And there were many other comments that we received at the last public meeting, and I don't intend to minimize those, but I just wanted to highlight some of the main concerns that we've taken note of through the public consultation to date. So based on the feedback, we've come up with this revised concept plan. So some of the main changes include changing the access from Napier Street to Brock Street. We've added some additional parking spaces, so we're now at 15 parking spaces and now exceed the ratio suggested by the parking study. We've also added an additional barrier-free space, so we're now meeting the minimum bylaw requirement and no longer need a reduction there. All of the bicycle parking is now located in a secure room on the ground floor, so we've eliminated the basement level altogether. Again, the height has been reduced from 4 to 3 residential stories. We received a lot of positive feedback on the rooftop terrace, so this was a feature that we did want to maintain, but what we have added is a portion of that will be enclosed in order to provide some full year-round access to that space. And based on the reduced unit count, the reduced floor area, because we've taken off the top story, we've removed the basement level, reduced the unit count, our overall density and lot occupancy is also lowered. This is a rendering of the revised design. So again, it's a 3-story residential building now, 3 stories of residential. You may have noted in some of the literature available through DASH or through the notices that this is technically called a 4-story building, despite the fact that you see 3 residential stories. And the reason for that is because the rooftop structures, so the enclosed amenity room, the mechanical equipment, and the stair overrun or the stairwell shaft collectively take up more than 10% of the roof area. So by virtue of that, the zoning bylaw says you have to call it a story. So we've made sure to locate these features at the back of the building so that it can't be seen from Brock Street, so it visually looks like a 3-story building. This is a view of the building from the rear, so as if you were standing in the future park, looking at the building. And this is where you can really start to see that enclosed amenity space that I was referencing on the top level. You can also see some of the amenity features, so the trellises or the pergolas that will form part of the rooftop terrace. And just over here, you can also see the stair overrun or the stairwell shaft. One thing you can also start to see in this rendering, which is new, is we're proposing to slightly cantilever the second and third levels just at the rear towards the back. So the second and third levels basically project by about 1.6 meters towards the rear. And this was done to essentially recoup a little bit of floor area that we lost by removing the fourth level and removing the basement level. But as sort of a side benefit, it's nice because we get some weather protection for the rear entrances across the entire length of the building. This is a perspective of the building further west along Brock Street. So I did want to highlight that, at a certain point when you're away from the building, you can start to see that fourth floor amenity space. But I think given the substantial setback of that, the actual impacts at the street level will be minimal, if not non-existent, as you won't be able to see that fourth level when you're in front of the building. So just a brief summary of the changes that we've made. We've reduced the height, so it's now 3 stories of residential. Again, we received really positive feedback on the rooftop amenities, so we wanted to keep that, and we've sort of built literally upon that and added an enclosed space for year-round access. Important to note that we've kept this amenity room and all of the rooftop structures to the rear of the building so that they can't be visible from Brock Street. Again, access has been moved from Napier to Brock. Parking has been increased to 15 spaces, and we've added another barrier-free space. We've increased the amenity area pretty significantly so that we no longer need relief in this provision. And by reducing the overall height, floor area, and units, we have brought the density and the law occupancy down. I won't go over all of the zoning provisions in detail, but I'm happy to if there are any questions. But I will highlight that we do still require relief in setbacks, density, law occupancy, and parking, and we no longer need relief in barrier-free parking or amenity space. Now, one thing you'll note in the table is that the B3 zone, or the multiple family dwelling zone, doesn't actually have a maximum height provision. So in working with staff to draft this site-specific zone, we of course will be integrating a maximum height for the 3 stories, a separate maximum height for the amenity room, and we'll also be using language to strictly control the size of that amenity room and where it can be located, so that down the road it can't grow in size, it can't be pushed up to the street level. In terms of the zone schedule, it hasn't changed. We're still proposing that the future park block be general recreation park zone, so the P zone. We're not proposing to rezone the southwest corner, so it'll remain 1 and 2 family A, and we're still proposing a site-specific B3 zone. And that concludes the presentation. I also have with me the architect on the project, so if there are design questions, she's here to assist me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Could I hear from staff? Mr. Sands?
Certainly. Through you, Madam Chair, the application was recirculated based on the proposed changes, as you can see. And that included mail-out circulation to 134 properties within the surrounding 120-meter radius. It also included modified signs posted on site and a courtesy ad placed in the WIG standard. To date, I have received no public correspondence based on the modifications that were presented, nor have any telephone calls or inquiries been received. Thank you.
Sorry, did you say there were some
There has been no telephone calls, inquiries, nor written correspondence received to date.
Thank you very much. And questions from the committee? Seeing none, I would like to open the public meeting concerning 671 Brock Street, and we will do the same. There's a microphone on that side and a microphone on this side. Anyone who would like to speak, please come and give your name and address if you'd like to come over, sir. This one would be fine. Mr. Dixon, I've actually recognized this gentleman. And if you could keep it to 5 minutes, please. And we will collate all the questions from the public and have the proponent answer afterwards.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Turner. I live at 72 Regent Street. I'm a little bit nervous. I used to do tours here. I've been in this building 1,000 times, but not addressed a council meeting. So I have some concerns about this project. I hope I don't get booed out of the building, but this is just my own personal concerns. The one thing is there's a community garden just next door to this. And I'm concerned whether this is going to take the space of the community garden. And in the past, we've had people that have stolen things from our garden. People work hard to put their products, and then people come and steal our garden that we worked hard for. That's one concern of mine. Another thing is, I may get booed out of the building, but it's just me. Now, you're talking about putting low-income housing in there. I live across the park. Last summer, I found a whole bag of uncapped needles in the park. So I'm concerned if you're putting low-income housing, what kind of people you're going to be getting into. This is a family area, a lot of people with young children in this area. So I'm concerned about the kind of people that might be living there. And that's one of the big concerns I have. And, and that kind of thing. So that's basically the two concerns that I have are, what if you're going to make it low-income housing, like, no offense, but there's the area up in the Heights, the Dorado Heights, is not the best area to live in as it used to be. So that's the two things that I'm concerned about, because there's a lot of kids, and I'm just afraid of some little kid getting in the area and then sticking their hand in a bag of needles or garbage, that kind of thing, or people who don't live in that area not respecting the property, as I've lived in there 30 years, and I just would like people to respect the area and not throw garbage and things on. Those are the two things. Those are the things I'm concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else wish to speak to the application, 671 Brock Street? Mr. Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank Dixon, 495 Alfred, Apartment 2, K7K, 4J4. So, thank you very much for the presentation. I think you explained the differences between the original design and the new proposal very well, very clear, and excellent drawings as well. It's easy to figure out what's going on. I attended the original meeting, and I've also examined the property and listened to a lot of the debate in public. So I'll start off. I very much like the new plan for access from Brock Street. I think that's a major improvement. So thanks for responding to the feedback from public on that. And I like the reduction in the height and in the number of units. Again, I think that's a very positive step there. Looking at the new design, its actual sort of physical attractiveness, I find that quite a bit less attractive than the original design. Not quite sure if I'm the only one in the room who believes that, but it looks a little bit kind of avant-garde in a neighborhood that's kind of average, shall we say, a well-established neighborhood, a lot of very handsome houses without a lot of crazy features. So I would just prefer what we are to build would look more like the original design. You've got some interesting features from the design standpoint with this design, which I like. And those were explained very well. So I'm supportive of the partial affordable housing component with the project, very much so. This area doesn't have affordable housing, and there's a major need for it in Kingston. I do want to have the new parkland that's created to be connected to Churchill Park. This has been talked about at the first public meeting and in the community and so forth. By closing Napier Street for as far north as possible. I understand that there is a home that's on Napier that would have to have its access, coming from Mac in that case, but that shouldn't be a big deal. We would obtain some more parkland through that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the original consultation and how that was done. There's going to be a report coming to council on February 21st, according to what the mayor said at the meeting of the coalition, which he attended 2 weeks ago. I was there for that. So the original public consultation was very badly flawed and needlessly so. That's not good enough by city staff.
Mr. Dixon, were you going to go into that to an extent, because that's not something that the land use planners will be able to address at this meeting? Any questions you have or comments about that process, that's not what they'll be able to discuss. So I just to let you know that we're really trying to focus more on the building.
Yeah,
and its,
thank you, Madam Chair. I do understand that. But I think it's significant, the fact that we've taken more time to get to this point than we should have. If we'd done better consultation, we could have been several months ahead of where we are now on this project. Okay, I'm going to come back here for a second meeting, and that's part of the flawed process, and I expect better from city staff in Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, sir. There we go.
Undercut. Hello, my name is David Johnson. I live at 243 Mac Street, so I'm just up Napier Street from the proposed development. I spoke at the last meeting here and dealt a bit with process. If we're not to talk about process and focus strictly on the zoning, what has invariably happened is much of the frustration that the residents around the park have revolves around process, and it rears its ugly head here at a zoning discussion. This is not a good thing, in my humble opinion. Zoning should be the result of a well-planned and well-executed operation. It shouldn't be a forum where the frustrations of the community are brought forward. Having said that, a group of us got involved with staff and the mayor, starting with the mayor and working down through staff. We attended, I believe, 4 meetings, and I have to give credit where credit is due. A lot was accomplished at those 4 meetings. I'm not sure we can take credit for the fact that it's only 3 stories, but we advocated for a lower profile, and you can, in fact, discuss stuff with City Hall if you're willing to put in the time. And the building design, in my humble opinion, is an improvement over the predecessor. I personally felt that the original facade looked better in terms of fitting in with the rest of the community, but I think we made good progress. It's a better building for staff, having taken the time to talk to interested parties. It was time-consuming, I realize, and I got the sense that, yes, it's a busy organization, but I thank staff for taking the time to do this. Can the building be better? I think it can. There is still, again, the facade could improve, I think, and there has been discussion at every meeting of having a more transparent top-level parapet instead of a solid piece of the building, something like a glass balustrade or whatever. Again, I don't know whether I do know, but it's getting late in the day for changes, but I think we can still improve the building. The interior of the building, I think, has also been improved, and again, congratulations to everyone who's worked on that. If I had to comment on if we had to do this again, what would we do differently? Talk to people sooner. This little exercise that we went through in transparent government, if you will, in my humble opinion, was a success, and we should work on doing that again. If the A lot comes up for this sort of a discussion again, let's not leave it till the last minute, and let's engage the community, and we'll get better built, or better buildings and a better neighborhood because of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, if you'd like to come forward.
Still on? It's just really more of a comment. I live at
Just get your name and
My
address,
name
please.
is Laura Bond, and I live at 229 Mac. Sort of just to, this first time I've ever been involved in something like this. This is certainly an improvement to what we thought it was going to be. However, one thing I just wanted to mention is that, is it going to be a concrete or a wood frame? Because if it's wood frame, I've lived in wood frame buildings, and you want to build a structure where you're going to have retention and people who want to stay there, where there's not a lot of movement. In wood frame buildings, you hear everything. And so I'm just wondering if they will be like some of the the apartments that they're building or condos that are concrete and you can't hear your neighbor talking or sneezing, or people want to live in a building where they don't hear everyone. And I'm just wondering if that's the case for here, if it's going to be wood or concrete.
Thank you. The architect will speak to us when we've received all our questions. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Clements.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo some of the comments that I appreciate the...
I would need your name and address.
John Clements, 152 Napier Street. I appreciate the fact that there's been some movement, both in terms of height, and although it's a little bit in density, that's still pretty high. I would like to put my comments in a slightly different perspective. Although this is a zoning matter, it's my own understanding that also because it is a zoning matter by the municipality, in effect, it's also a severance application. In other words, the ultimate outcome would be to have 3 separate portions because the municipality has done it. So it's within the context of the severance applications that I'd like to address all 3 areas. Normally, as you know, this would be done either through subdivision control or through an application to the Committee of Adjustment, so I'll put my comments within that context. Number 1, in regards to the parkland, I think we've all assumed that we're looking for parkland, but I think there has to be more definition as to why the parkland is there within the reports. This latest report has absolutely no mention of why it should be changed to P. I didn't see it there unless I missed it from the reading. Therefore, it should refer to things like the provincial policy statement, which says that there must be equitable distribution of parkland. And as you know, councillors were provided in the fall with all kinds of data based both upon the 2011 analysis by your own Parks Department, but also on the master plan parks that showed that this area was the most efficient in the city and was growing. Since that period of time, there's been 2 substantial changes to population. For example, the OMB has ordered that the inclusion of students that live in the area be added onto the census in all future areas. And also, there has been, I believe, almost 800 new bedroom plus. For example, the area on Johnson Street, which has over 120 some odd bedrooms, and specifically designated for students. Again, also at the corner of Princess and Victoria, which we affectionately call the Fire Building. There's others that have been gone on Frontenac Street and Albert Street as well, and I believe that those numbers are justified. So there's a potential for many hundreds, if not thousands more people beyond those calculations. That official plan statement, which you have in your official plan, details a specific amount for how much more additional parkland should be added. And it is much, much more than the small amount that you've added here. In fact, it's much more than the total. That brings us to the second portion, the corner of Napier and Brock, which is the area that you have designed to stay as it is in the zoning application for the purposes of resale. The caveat, by the way, on the legislation that allows you to sever with this is that it must be used for municipal purposes. I would suggest to you that selling off to the private sector is not for municipal purposes. And with that in mind, I would fail to understand why the rationale that one might use for the parkland would also not apply to that as well. And I think that would be a good argument at another jurisdiction, perhaps. The third thing is in regards to the building that is there, the neighborhood has not objected to affordable housing. They've objected to the fact that it's not in keeping with the neighborhood. There is specific policies within the official plan which say that it must be within keeping. In fact, I understand that the OMB right now is changing their criteria to put more substantiation and weight behind that particular criteria because it has been ignored in the past in other jurisdictions. So it's something that should be looked at. I look at that building, which is your second one, and I'm reminded of my travels in Eastern Europe in the 70s. For those people who have not been there, they feature a distinctive type of housing called Stalinistic type architecture. And I realize that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but certainly I see no beauty. A person earlier in the evening referred to the green spots on there as an example of a paintball project. I understand where you're coming from, but it just doesn't look very good. And it's certainly, in my opinion, it's not in keeping. For those who walk around the neighborhood, it's mostly 1 and 2 families. Houses, it may be rental, it may be students, whatever, but it is smaller buildings, not at that height, and that is significantly bigger than anything else in that area. You have to go a long ways to find another B3 zone that comes to that. In fact, the B3 zone on Johnson Street, which was approved, is lower than this and has only 123 units per net hectare. When you say you decreased it, you went from 208 to 196, if I'm not correct. Please excuse my sarcasm, okay? But I don't think that's that's bigger than anywhere else that I've been able to find in current existing anywhere in the city. Maybe there is a spot that I don't know about, but that's not B3. The height of B3 is about 123, 125, according to your OP. This is huge. The neighboring area is about 30 units per acre. And you're going to 196, 6.5 times the density of anything else in the area. People ask me, how could you have changed it? I suggested, why didn't you use more of the land that you set aside for private housing and bring down the height more that way? Nobody considered that I know of, but that's one particular option that I think you should look at. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm just sorry, I just don't think it fits in with the neighborhood architecturally, and the other parts that I mentioned about the zoning, I think are very applicable to the need for additional parkland in that area. The last thing I'd like to suggest to you is that you set an example with this density. And I know the city's big into intensification, but there's a fine line between intensification and huge mammoth projects that are different than the rest of the area. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, may I from this podium because I have a presentation?
Okay. We'll have James help you get your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you. So now I'll have is this on? Oh, yes, okay. Thank you. My name is Annette Burfoot. I live at 74 Regent Street. I live on the other side of the park from the proposed building. I've lived there 24 years and love the neighborhood. Oops. My question is, how do you entertain a building with a density of 196 DUs per hectare in a zone limited to 123? This is taken from the information on the dash. This is the decrease, the statement of the decrease in the current, the two sets of plans that we're dealing with. This is the plan, this is a floor plan of the second and third floors of the proposed building. And what I want to point your attention to, I know it's really hard to see. It's working. There we go. So most of them are bachelors. In the bachelor units, there's one right there. The only storage space is that cupboard there. It's like a cloak cupboard. If you want to get a comparison, there's the bathtub. So it's slightly larger than the bathtub, probably 6 by 2, I imagine. So these units have very little storage. There's no storage in the basement. There's no basement. So here we have a very dense building, and this is the issue that I'm concerned about, is density. I keep doing this from... And what I wanted to do, I went last Saturday and I took photos of the area, because we've been looking a lot at the building, and I acknowledge that there was constructive conversations between the staff and some members of the neighborhood, of the community, and they did change the building slightly, but all the attention's been focused on the building, and nothing has been done about where this building is going to be set down. There, it's going to be set down, right here. And what I want to show you, so we're looking, this is on Brock Street, looking back. Those are the houses behind where the proposed building is. So that's Mack Street there. This is Napier here. So that gives you a sense of if we were in front of the building would probably be that high by the tree, I'm estimating, in that block. So imagine that block that you've been seeing. These are the houses in front of the building. Here is Brock Street. Notice how set back the houses are. Everyone zooms down Brock and Johnson to get from one place to another. We're the community you're zooming through. And it's actually a very pleasant community, and it's pleasant because the houses are well set back, they're spaced apart. Various types of people live in these houses, including low income. And some houses are better kept than others, including on Brock and Johnson. There's a kind of low rate of intensification going on. A lot of people buy the small bungalows and put on another floor, not to make a monster house for student rentals, but to make a family home that is more conducive to contemporary standards of living. So the building would be right here on the left, towering about that high over these 2-story building there. Oops, sorry. There's another angle from where the building's going to be. So here is the PUC building, and there is the lot right here. So the building would be roughly there. And the park, that's Churchill Park over there. So to give you a sense of the size there. That's looking down Brock. There's been talk about, well, Brock is a throughway and should be a site of intensification. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. It's the extent of the intensification that I am most taken back by, that this is an enormous degree of intensification. This is a very large building, a very blockish building, very out of keeping with the surrounding houses. The setbacks are not the same at all. It's going to fundamentally change the feeling of driving down Brock, and it's going to fundamentally change the way we experience our neighborhood. This is right around the corner from the proposed site. The building's roughly around here. The proposed site's roughly around here. There's Brock, and this is MacDonnell. Here's an apartment building. There are lots of these in our neighborhood. We do have things other than single-family homes. And you can see they're usually 2.5 stories high, and obviously a lot less dense than what's being proposed here. There is nothing like this building in this neighborhood. Nothing. It is totally out of keeping with the entire neighborhood. This would be the view from the park. So this is looking right towards the area. So the building would be right here. It's hard to draw. It would be about that high, and that wide there. It would be a remarkable sight from the park. It would be very different than anything surrounding. There's nothing higher than 2 stories in the area for blocks, including on busy Brock Street. Thank you. I say this because I wanted people to get a sense of where this building is being put. We've not seen any images of how this image, I don't know how to turn back to your picture, how this building will look in our community. And I think it's important that we see it. When we were talking about, we were hearing the discussion of the Cooper Street project and people were talking about monster homes, that's what it felt like to me, that this was going to be a monster in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this application? Seeing none, oh, yes, ma'am.
Judy Vandenhoek, 179 Toronto Street. I beg to differ with the presenter's comments saying that you have looked at the comments that we made at the public meeting and you have decreased the density, decreased the number of units, and decreased the height. I have a math degree from the University of Waterloo. I agree, you have decreased them. But take a look at those statistics that were up there. Decreasing it from 32 units to 29 is not a substantial decrease. When you look at the density, you've switched it from 216 to 198, as was pointed out in a neighborhood that should be a maximum of 123. It is outrageous that this is being proposed for this neighborhood. Most of the houses in the neighborhood are 1 story. There's a few that are 1.5 stories, and I believe there might be 2 that are technically 2 stories. To put a monstrosity like that in our neighborhood is ridiculous. I'd like to know what the actual height is. You keep talking about stories, but some of the heights have varied, so I'd like to know what the actual height is. We talked about setbacks. Didn't look like there was much of a setback there, so I'd like to know the exact setbacks. Didn't look like a very wide sidewalk in front. We have lots of people walking down the sidewalk on Brock Street. As mentioned before by other people, that design does not match the neighborhood. Not only will it stick out like a sore thumb because of its height, but the way it's designed. It does not fall in place with the rest of the architecture of the neighborhood. Parking. I have come before the planning committee with many, many proposals that developers have made, and my key point is parking. Why you would allow them the relief of parking to only allow 15 parking spots for 29 units is beyond my belief. We have nowhere to park already in the neighborhood, and now you're going to put this huge building in and only put in 15 parking spots. They're asking for relief on the size of the parking spots to make them even smaller, so that instead of the original 13 spots that they had in that same space, they're putting in 15 because they're asking for relief in the size of the parking. I still stand on my comment that if you're going to have 4 access-free units, you need 4 parking spots. The shadowing of this building, somebody else commented on the community garden. I'm very much against the open market on the piece of property that's going to end up being beside it. No one's going to want to put in 1 and 2 family buildings there and sitting in the shadow of that box. The parking lot, I'm glad that the entrance is now off Brock Street. However, I'm hoping that you're going to be putting a fence at the back of the parking lot. I've spoke to that at the previous meeting. If our back area is going to be a park, it needs to be blocked off from this because you're going to have cars going through there. You're going to have children playing, and they're not going to be looking. So I want to make sure there's a fence dividing this property from the park. They can walk all the way to the sidewalk and go around like the rest of us. I have another concern about garbage. If you look at the building that's on Queen Street, the corner across from Staples, if you've driven by there at night before garbage pickup in the morning, all their huge, gigantic garbage bins sit in the street because that building was allowed to be built without any kind of setback. I just came from Christmas in Vancouver. All the buildings in Burnaby have to follow the setback so that on garbage days, their garbage sit on their property, not on the sidewalk and not in the street. So I hope the planning committee makes sure that their garbage is not sitting out in the street the day that garbage is collected. The process, we definitely did not follow the process that should have happened in our neighborhood, and this is why you have so many people so irate about this project. So I'm asking the planning committee to look at the process they follow on any future projects. I want to reiterate that that park is used by all around. I'm over on Toronto Street. We lost our park as far as walking dogs or anything else when the school put the artificial turf in. So whatever property you leave us for park is very tiny. There were concerns brought up earlier. My proposal would be to increase the parkland, get rid of the beside piece that's going to be going to open market, reduce your size to 2 stories with your stairwell stacked slightly above, and spread it out over the 2 pieces of property. That's what needs to be done to have it fit in with our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Good evening. My name is Don Votary, and I live backing up to the proposed park space. And I first of all have to say that I think that most all of what was previously said, I'd have to say I agree with. But there's a couple things that I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, and that is, first of all, that once we got into this mess, city staff and the Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation people met with us, and I believe that they did listen to a number of things. I was privileged to be part of a small group that met with them, and I want to thank all of those people that participated in helping to make the changes that have been made, such as the entrance off Brock Street and reduced height by 1 floor, and the setback. It hasn't been mentioned, but the setback off Brock in the new proposal is actually almost a meter more than it was previously. In fact, it sets closer to the street than the utilities building that we saw earlier, but it's only about 4 feet closer to the city, or sorry, to the property line or to Brock Street than that building, with the increased setback at the front. And I just want to leave the Housing Corporation people 2 things that I've been pounding away on that I want you to still consider, and it was mentioned earlier. A transparent rail at the top would definitely help it to look lower, and would also allow somebody that's possibly sitting in a wheelchair to be able to see the nice park that we hope will evolve, and or at least sections of that could be transparent, and it's really not that costly to do. And if you want an example, everybody knows the different Tim Hortons around. So across from the Clergy and Princess Street Tim Hortons, there's a building that's been put there. I assume it's residence, but I don't know. I just saw it the other day. And it has a nice rooftop amenity space with a glass rail around. And it really, I thought, looked pretty good. So I want you to continue to think about that, the Housing Corporation people. And also, it was mentioned earlier about sound transfer. And my experience in construction really is, has to side with the person who spoke about, wood construction versus concrete. And I think we all in this room want this to be a really good building. And we want the residents who live in it to have a good experience. And so I strongly suggest that concrete be considered in the construction of this, perhaps ICF or other forms of concrete construction. I know you can meet the building code with wood frame construction, and I'm a carpenter by trade, but you can't beat the concrete. And I guess that's it. So thank you to the whole community, including all my great neighbors that I'm getting to know, in helping to work to make this better and maybe better for the future for similar situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Karen Lavin, and I'm living at 698 Brock Street for 43 years. I find that building, I'm sorry to say that, pretty ugly too. It reminds me of the German Democratic Republic, which were built, those type of houses were built in 45 after the war in 1950. I feel, of course, I said in my in the first public meeting, I was very much in favor for that whole property for a public parkland, having it combined with Churchill Park. And I feel that this would only be an asset for this region, having a combined and enlarged Churchill Park. So even to counterbalance this ever-increasing traffic now, it's becoming through traffic. And even in particular with heavy trucks, we need more green spaces with trees to absorb the pollution, the air pollution, the noise pollution. And what I can't understand is when you go to Princess Street, there are so many empty spots. It's already zoned for 3 or 4 or 5-story apartment buildings. Why can they not take sort of, I read in the newspaper about infill development. Why can it not be used there and leave? And I have new neighbors. They're moving in with 3 little children. So it seems to be every 40 years you have younger people coming in. The older one, I'm the older one now. I'm probably in 10 years, who knows, I'm gone too. But I think we have to do, my point is having more green space. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak before I ask the proponents to answer quite a number of questions? This will be last chance. You've got quite a list, so I will ask you to begin, and I think we'll probably have the same list. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I think I'll first try to address some of the comments and concerns about density and height first, and then I'll try to circle back and then maybe answer some of the more specific and different questions that people had. Certainly, there's no doubt that this project represents a significant intensification of this site. It currently it's vacant and served as a former school site. But I think it's important first to look at what the official plan says in terms of where it envisions intensification projects to occur. And there are certain locational criteria that we look to try to assess whether or not intensification, particular residential intensification, is appropriate. And there are criteria like, does it front on an arterial road? Is there sufficient transit nearby? Is it close to public open space? Are you in close proximity to commercial uses and services and amenities? And I think certainly this project checks a lot of those boxes. And I think it's also important to recognize the fact that this is exclusively bachelor and one-bedroom units. Net density, which is a measure of number of units per net hectare, on its own isn't necessarily the best way to assess the appropriateness of a high-density residential use. For example, this will be a 25-unit development and will have 29 bedrooms, whereas a 29-unit development with, say, only 4-bedroom units would have 116 bedrooms while having the identical net density on paper. So I think while, yes, on paper, this is a higher density than what the zoning bylaw envisions, from a building typology perspective, at 3 stories, I would say this development fits more within a medium density residential use. So yes, we'll have additional people living here, but there's adequate servicing available, and it's quite a central location, has great access to transit, great access to existing open space and future open space as well. In terms of height, as I mentioned, the official plan does contemplate certain situations where intensification is appropriate, and it does look to things like providing appropriate transitions in height. And I think going down to 3 stories represents a significant improvement in that regard. Right next door is a 2-story building, and as was pointed out earlier in the other presentation, across the street you have sort of 2-story buildings that they were originally bungalows that have been added to. So I think transitioning from 2 stories to 3 stories is appropriate in this situation, particularly given the setbacks. You have a street separating the 2 uses, plus the proposed almost 4-meter front yard setback. To the east, we have a parking lot and a Kingston Hydro building. So I think with the reduction in particular to 3 stories, we can provide that appropriate transition to the nearby 2-story dwellings. And I'm going to circle back to the beginning. There was a question about the community garden and whether this project would be replacing those community gardens. So the community garden you can see is just to the east of the site. So the development will not interfere with those existing uses. In fact, there are plans for a potential connection through the community garden to the future park space. In terms of concerns with residents of this future building, what I will say is that it will be a mixed building. So there will be a combination of affordable units as well as market units. So I think there will be a wide variety of types of people who will be living in this building. We've noted concerns and comments regarding the design in terms of style, materials, colors. The architect is here tonight and we're making notes, and we certainly will look at making revisions. This is a contemporary building. The design is contemporary. This stretch of Rock Street, I think, is actually a little bit eclectic. You have sort of wartime houses across the street. You have the Chinese Alliance Church, which is sort of an 80s light stone veneer building. If you go a little further west, you have primarily vinyl-sided buildings. But we can certainly look at ways to alter the design to maybe be a little more in keeping with some of the other surrounding uses, maybe in materials or articulation. I know with the reduced height, whether or not this will be wood frame or concrete, I think is to be determined. And maybe the architect can speak to that and as well speak to maybe some of the what's being proposed in terms of insulation that would assist with things like soundproofing between units. Go ahead.
Rhonda Horn-McQuay with Colburn and Campbell Architects. Excuse me. So the building is currently designed as a wood frame structure. However, we are taking measures to ensure that the sound control between units, both floor to floor and through walls, are adhered to in terms of the sound controls of the building code. Things like, for example, where we have back-to-back kitchens in units, they are not plumbed and have the electrical receptacles run in the party wall between units. They are run in a furring within the own unit so that your sound separation wall is not interrupted. So you're not getting into situations where you have back-to-back receptacles, which is one of the biggest concerns in apartments when you're back-to-back in wood frame. Floor to floor, it's also taking into account that sound transfer, including acoustic bat insulation and resilient channels, and the way that the flooring will be installed related to the dividing wall panels. So again, those are details in construction, and there would be care in the construction to ensure that that sound quality is maintained. Also wanted to speak a little bit about the appearance of the building, something that I don't believe is really showing in the renderings because they are not high quality in terms of, by quality I mean it's not a photoreal rendering, so the materials are not coming through in this. The lower portion that's rendered in a red is a brick, picking up on the brick in the housing in the area. The brown color is a wood appearance siding. It is a metal siding with an extremely photoreal to wood appearance. And then the other lighter color is another siding as an accent color. I think there are some things that we could certainly do to tie with the surrounding areas, and that's something that we'll have to work with the client and within budget constraints to improve upon.
Thank you, Rhonda. And I'll also just note, those are intended to be trees in front of the building, what they'll look like once they're mature. Although the paintball art might be an interesting interpretation, but those are intended to be trees. There was a question about why are we zoning the park block P, as there was not a lot of detail on the rationale for that. This is the general recreation park zone, so it's sort of the most used and flexible zone used for park spaces in this particular zoning bylaw, so it allows for basically the most broad range of park-like uses, from more passive uses to very highly programmed uses like play structures and fields. So it's highly flexible and allows for basically every type of use you would associate with an urban park. Just quickly on setback and concerns with where to put garbage during garbage day. Like what was mentioned by the previous speaker, we have increased the front yard setback to almost 4 meters. It's 3.9 meters, I believe. So there will be sufficient space during garbage day to store garbage at the street without it being right on the street. There is a garbage room in the building, and garbage will be wheeled out weekly by the property manager. In terms of potential shadow impacts, we haven't done a true sun shadow study, as they typically aren't required for a building of this height. But based on the way the building is oriented, it's anticipated that any shadow impacts would occur primarily on the site's own parking area, as this is situated on the north side of the street. We can certainly look at a transparent rail at the roof level. Currently, what we have proposed is, I think, a 1.2 meter parapet, so solid structure that would basically prevent people from going over the edge. So we can certainly look at options to make that, at least in part, transparent. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
I think two other questions were, what is the height of the building and the parking sizes?
I'm looking to the architect to confirm, but, so there's two different heights. There's the height to the top of the 3rd floor parapet, which is the bulk of the building right here, which is, I think,
10.8 meters.
10.8 meters, thank you. And the height of the amenity room to the rear, I believe, is just under 13 meters.
Yes, at 12.8 meters.
And again, that's included in, there are elevations that were submitted in support of this revised design that include all of the heights, so to the top of the parapet, all the individual floors to the top of the amenity room, all of those heights are provided.
The other one was parking sizes.
Oh, the parking sizes, yes. So the parking reduction has actually changed from the initial submission. We asked for relief in both the length and the width. We no longer, or we need a not as large of a reduction for the length. I can confirm those measurements.
Jen?
Yes.
They are 5.7 meters by 2.6 meters for the standard parking space and 3.7 by 5.7 for the barrier-free.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to bring it back to the committee. Are there questions from the committee? Councillor Neal?
Just a couple of questions. I'm used to seeing renderings that kind of always look better than when it's a built form and completed. And this, I agree that this is the color, the 3-tone rendering definitely gives me pause. And if the parapet can be done in glass, that would be, I think, a great improvement because it would give the appearance of a lower building than what is actually there. A lot of the questions that were presented, I know, are site plan kinds of questions around waste and parking, and I would add landscaping to that as well. I know that typically we bump up, and just to explain to people, a bump up is right now we've delegated site plan to planning, so it never comes back to the planning department, so it never comes back to the planning for a report. And but councillors are given an opportunity to bump up. And given the number of questions that people have presented, I will be bringing forward a bump up request, and I think I'll probably do that for the 21st council meeting. So it'll still give staff an opportunity to address that. We'll receive a public report here at planning. The public aren't given an opportunity to ask questions except through their councillors. So you can email anybody on the committee and we will make sure that your questions are addressed. So that's just by way of heads up. But if you could take that into consideration, and if staff can, both landscaping, waste management, I think you've come a long way with parking. I still am always concerned when there are a number of adult bedrooms and far fewer but parking spaces than the adult bedrooms. So I heard two different numbers, that it was 25 units with 29 bedrooms, and I also heard that it was 29 units. Can you clarify that for me?
Certainly, yes. It's 29 units and 29 bedrooms. It's 29 units. They're all 1 bedroom and bachelor.
Thank you.
I've closed the public portion of the meeting, but anytime, oh, sorry, which question was that? I think that's going to be for our city staff. The proponents present the project, staff then gives us, in our comprehensive report, the justifications for the staff's recommendation. So it's actually not the proponent's job to justify the density, in my understanding. But go ahead.
Well, respectfully, when I began my response, I tried to speak to height and density first, but perhaps I'll circle back. Again, there are official plan policies that speak to where density and intensification is intended to occur, and there are certain locational criteria, which I spoke to previously, which through our assessment, we've determined that this location sort of checks the boxes in terms of what those criteria are intended to do.
Okay, thank you. And again, when we, well, two things. One, we have a planner on file, and you are more than welcome to continue to discuss the application with the planner on file. Anyone is welcome to also present written comments to the planner, because what staff is going to do now is take everything that has been said at this meeting and put it together with their comments for a comprehensive report. And until this committee votes, comments can be received and incorporated into the planner, the staff's position, and the committee's position. So nothing is finished, and you are more than welcome to discuss anything in a continuing basis with the planner on file. And as Councillor Neal said, talk to councillors as well as an avenue. But to be on the record, best to have something written to the planner on file. And if there are no other questions from the committee, I will say thank you very much for your presentation, and that will close this public meeting. Thank you. And I would like to now open the regular Planning Committee meeting and call the meeting to order and request approval of the agenda with the addendum. Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. All those in favor? That's carried. And confirmation of the minutes, Thursday, January the 19th. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Comments, questions? All those in favor? Thank you, that carries. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. Delegations, briefings, business none, motions, notice of motion. Other business none, correspondence was in the addendum, and the next meeting is February 16th of this month. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor McLaren. All those in favor? Yes, I got you in. Thank you very much.